Hi, E.A Smiroldo. Welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yes, glad to have you here. You're bringing something new and exciting to my audience today. We might even have a new book genre. We've got a thriller. So, what do you not love about that? So, first of all, before we dive into your book and your concept, tell us how you got into writing.
Well, I've always had a creative streak, although my profession is as an engineer. I studied engineering in college. When I was in high school, I was the one that had these elaborate science projects that got me in trouble a few times. I remember one time I made my father uh, take me to University of Maryland. I got permission to have all my bean seeds irradiated in their nuclear reactor. Somehow I convinced them to let me do this, and so we did that, and they really were very stunted and weird. I put them in our a room at my school where the sun came in, and yeah, they looked awful, and everybody freaked out because they thought, "Oh no, are these radioactive?" Which they weren't, but they
Oh,
immediately got frightened. So yeah, so I was always had a creative streak, but I think I think of science and writing and music and all these arts as sort of a continuum because you have to be creative to be an engineer. It all
mhm.
comes into play. So
Well, that brings up, and this is not the part of our conversation going forward, but that brings that STEAM concept in. What you just said really hones in and defines that STEAM concept. I don't think a lot of people feel or know that it takes creativity to be an engineer. I think people look at engineers as being just very one, two, three, four, five, very logical minded people. I had never heard that. And when you said the convergence of, say, music and science, and then the writing concept, that's the whole STEAM. That's the arts part. The writing is the arts part with all the other engineering type of things.
I'm completely with you. Of course, when you're young, you love, of course, you love music, you love reading comic books, and
Yeah.
my sister and I would make up stories, and she would tell me story. My sister was really she's a great writer herself. She would tell me stories every night to help me go to bed because we shared a room together.
Oh,
It was really I know she's fantastic, but, yeah, so this was always part of my life. My parents are great storytellers, they're from Italy. I think, they had a lot of great stories of life in the old country. They got more and more embellished, I think, as time went on.
yeah. Oh, wow. That sounds wonderful about your sister making up stories for her younger sister. Oh, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. So, as you fast forward in your life, you become an engineer. So, give us a little glimpse in your educational background.
I studied engineering at University of Maryland. I was the Renaissance woman of the engineering majors. I started in electrical, and I think it was chemical, and I just sort of danced around the engineering majors, but they had one that you could pick a couple of concentrations. So
Yeah.
I did study nuclear engineering as part of my curricula, and then on the job, just really fell in love with the field, specific aspects of the field. I can't say I fell in love with all of it, but
Yes.
my niche was in nonproliferation. So I that's weapons, nonproliferation,
Oh,
making sure that different,
yes.
different things that can be used to make a weapon don't fall in the wrong hands. So that's what I do now.
Right.
Consultant. I
Wow.
do that.
Well, thank goodness. I'm glad that somebody's working on that little tidbit.
Yeah.
Now, so you brought to us today a climate change thriller, and you call it Cli-Fi, which I think is so ingenious. It's the silent count. Okay, so how well, I can see how you came up with the concept a little bit based on what you do, but how did you pull into the climate change aspect? You know, how did you come up with the concept basically of the book?
Well, the origin story of my novel is that when I was sitting in a nuclear engineering class in school,
Mhm.
my first one, the very first page of the book, and granted it was an edition that was quite old because the major was so unpopular. There would be a handful of students in the class at most at the
Right.
time that they didn't update the book for years, but it said you can use nuclear weapons for peaceful purposes, such as building harbors, extracting oil from shale, and eliminating certain mountain ranges to create more favorable weather patterns. And I thought, wow, someone's got to write a crazy science fiction novel about this. Nobody did, and it sort of stuck in my craw for a long time. I
Mhm.
think, then I started hearing about climate change. It got more and more in the news, and I thought there's an intersection there, maybe,
Wow.
we can use this concept to sort of as a satire. No one's saying that we should do this for real, but
Right, right,
sort of as
right.
a satire where life in the near future, everything gets so bad that they have to turn to this, crazy method to do something about the climate.
Wow. Well, tell us a little bit about the story. What kind of characters will we find in The Silent Count?
The main character is a young woman. She, is in her first job. She goes from being a superstar in college and, she thinks the sky's the limit, she's gonna do great. Well, then she goes out in the real world and she's a big nobody, and at first nobody pays attention to anything she says, and she's got massive student loans. Her dad has gambling problems, and
Uh,
she's trying to help him, like, all these terrible things. She's broken up with her fiancé, who is a musician, who's actually his star is on the rise, and she's got to
uh,
see him everywhere. So it's a young woman with all these issues, but she gets caught up in this, someone scoops her up and says, we think that you have something here. So she's overjoyed and she can, use her skills to actually do something. But it's a thriller, so as you can imagine, all heck has to break loose, and perhaps the ideas might fall into the wrong hands.
oh
Knowing
my.
who to trust is a big part of the story.
Ah, and with her dad having a gambling addiction, maybe that's part of maybe her Achilles heel, maybe to make her do some stuff that she doesn't really wanna do?
Make her not really think things through. If someone says, "Hey, we'll help you with we'll give you something to get through your issues," I mean, I know there's a lot of people with student loan issues. I mean, that's a big part of I think there's a lot of kids that they're delaying a lot of life decisions. They're just taking whatever job they can to pay off their bills,
Yeah.
and you don't really ask too many questions when someone's, got a great opportunity for you sometimes.
Right, right. I can see that. I can see that easily happening.
Yeah.
Now, you got your climate change naysayers. People are like, oh, that's not real. So, how are you sort of convincing people that climate change is real in this book? Kind of like an underlying thing. How's that working out? And do you see that segment of the population? As being a hindrance to your book sales.
There is that element, of the population. I would like to note that, I wrote this book over a series of years, and
Mhm.
I have included things in the book like storms, bad, wildfires, things that have happened and a lot of them I've sort of tried to model, maybe not exactly on real life, but I found that as I was writing it, what was going on in real life was infinitely worse than what was going on in the book. So I had
Mhm.
to change some of the things that were going on in the world to mirror what was going on in real life and seem a little worse than that. But
Right.
I couldn't because, as I said, it just kept getting worse. Things like a whole apartment building falling to the ground and killing a ton of people in Florida because of
Yes.
seawater inversion,
Right.
things like that. So in that respect, I hope the naysayers are looking around and being honest with themselves about what's going on in the real world. Um,
Right.
There's another side to the coin where there are some people who just say, well, then we've got to stop having cars and we've got to stop. My 90-year-old dad is not going to be riding a bike anytime soon, for example. Um,
Right.
so we have to understand. I think that there's a technological solution that we need to seek out that doesn't completely, because people just aren't going to do. I don't think people are going to completely tomorrow stop using fossil fuels, or I just
Right,
don't think that's
right,
going to happen. So
right.
anyway, that's my soapbox
Well,
today.
I have said to myself, here in our household, we want to switch over to electric cars, EVs, and but there's not the infrastructure is not there in my town to buy an EV. I wouldn't want to have to go to Charlotte, which is about 20 miles away, to charge it. I mean, you'd have the charger at your house, but just in case, I can see some kind of missteps happening. My particular town, I can only think of one charging station. But still, I would love to switch over, but I just don't see the infrastructure there to support my EV wish.
Exactly. I
Yes.
know that there are incentives to create a better infrastructure. I was, but I was just in California not too long ago where there's a law in place that all the new vehicles have to be EVs by a certain
Yeah,
date. And so
that's
California
right.
goes, so goes the nation. So
Right.
I didn't see that many charging stations anywhere, and they're the ones that are really, if someone's gonna buy a car, my car, I drive them until the wheels fall off. So if
Me
I'm gonna
too.
buy a car tomorrow, I'm gonna make sure that it's gonna last a long time. So if I lived
Yes.
in California, I guess I would be looking for something. But yeah, if you don't have the infrastructure, if there's a whole parking lot with 2 stations, that's
Yeah.
it's not there yet. So yeah, and then
Right.
you've gotta wonder, you've got countries where, and I don't just mean Russia. I mean, I know people say Russia is a gas station disguised as a country or something. I think that's what people say. Um, but there are numerous countries where the entire economy is based on oil and gas,
Yeah.
and if you eliminate that for those people, then what? So I think, we have to think beyond just we need
Right.
EVs because we do. And then there's the minerals, the batteries, the minerals used in batteries, all those mines. Do we have enough mining for that? No. Do we have to buy those
Right.
from foreign sources? Yes. Do we have good
Right.
relationships with these foreign sources? Not necessarily. So
Right. Right.
do we want to
Wow.
be in a position? So there's too much, to just stop at we need EVs. I think there's a much broader issue that we have to think of plan A, plan B, plan C.
You're right, and I never thought about it that deeply, as you went to the whole battery aspect. So yeah, you are exactly right. Tell you something else I didn't think of, and this affected me deeply, and I think it was because I wasn't down there when was I? Yeah, was I? I think I was down in Florida when it happened. Anyway, you talked about the condominium complex that just crashed to the bottom, to the ground with people in it in Florida a few
Yeah,
years ago. Maybe was that maybe 2 years ago, 2 summers ago?
it was
And
relatively recently. Mhm.
I that affected me greatly, and I guess because I was headed down there, yes, I was headed down there, and as a matter of fact, I went to, a mall. Oh gosh, I can't remember the towns now, but I went to Miami, but I went to there's a mall that I love to go there. It's a very high-end upscale mall that I love to go to there, and just down the road was the area where that building had crashed down, and they had you couldn't even get near it. They circumvented all the traffic way around that whole thing by several streets. You couldn't even, approach that. And you wouldn't even want to see anything like that. But you mentioned that something about the seawater. Tell us a little bit more about that and what happened there because I always thought it was the structure of the building itself that caused that, but you're saying some climate change was possibly for that tragedy to happen. Could you explain more there?
Sure. I don't have a ton of information about it, but my understanding was that the seawater, there was seawater intrusion, that wasn't planned for because it was built, I think, in the 1980s before
Mhm,
the rise of the sea level was an issue. So the
mhm,
seawater intrusion went into the garage structure, and,
mhm.
seawater is going to corrode things. It's gonna,
Yes.
it's gonna create structural problems. I know actually I have some property, in Ocean City, Maryland that was built in the '80s, and this is actually a
Mhm.
big issue in that, with coastal properties that people are wondering about. So I know the insurance industry, people say, "Oh, the climate deniers." I don't think the climate deniers, are no realize or will admit what's going on in the insurance industry, but I know my, condo, it was very hard to find an insurer for it, the one I have, at the
Mm,
beach, because it's real, and this is something that we really have to consider. So, yeah, I mean, I know there are gonna be people saying, "Oh, no, that wasn't the problem," but,
mhm.
there's I think that it's pretty logical that, if the seawater level is rising and it's getting in there, it's gonna wreak havoc.
Oh my goodness. Again, something I had never thought of. And, it's kind of like I can't wait to share this information with someone who felt as deeply as I did when that condominium fell in Florida. Because again, we go to Miami pretty regularly. And traveling along that way, I mean, that's a complex we've seen time and time and time again.
Mhm.
So it was just very devastating to have even heard about that. Now, switching gears, you work with Black Chateau,
Uh-huh.
uh, correct? And so now, tell me about that relationship. I talked to a variety of writers, and some are self-published. I mean, and they're really, really, really self-published. Some are hybrid. Tell us about the relationship that you have with your publishing company.
Well, my publishing company is Solstice
Mhm,
Publishing, and it's a
mhm.
traditional publisher.
Oh,
They, plucked my book out of the slush pile, and, God bless them. They did all the front end work. They're a very small press. So I have help from Black Chateau, which is the publicist, which is the
yes.
marketing company, and they've been absolutely wonderful. They, helped me get the word out about my novel, and, they have a few, uh, they have a book fest, for example, and I know that I have a nice talk coming up with the book fest where I'm going to talk about science and
Mhm.
fiction and how science, can be a part of not just science fiction, but fiction in general. So,
Yes.
yeah, they're great people. I'm also gonna be at their booth on April 23rd, 2023, on Sunday, signing books at the LA Times Book Festival.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
exciting.
it's gonna be fun.
Yes.
If anyone's
Well, now
in LA, please come by.
yes, exactly. Well, EA, do you have any other books coming out soon or working on anything?
I am absolutely, trying to get the sequel finished, so yes, my character will be back to finish saving the world in the next installment, but, it's still a work in progress. I have been able to do some other work. I'm judging a novel writing contest for climate fiction that's sponsored by University of Southampton in the United Kingdom in the
Yes.
UK, and I was a beta reader on one of their books that they called No More Fairy Tales, which is a cli-fi anthology that came out not too long ago. Um, I did, write the first chapter of my sequel and enter it into a contest, which won an honorable mention, and that story is part of a small anthology released by a library. So if you look up my name, E.A Smiroldo, and the name of the story is Diamonds, if anyone wants a sneak peek, they can look and check it out.
Ooh, wow, you heard it here first. First of all, the silent count is gonna be a series. The second thing is that you can get a sneak peek. Wow, that's very exciting news. Well, I tell you, EA, we will certainly have your contact information in the podcast show notes, as well as the video description box on YouTube and that sneak peek. So just send that to me and we will make sure it will be dropped in. Well, EA, it's been wonderful talking to you today. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of The Silent Count.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and I thank you for what you do, Deidre.